Hello, everyone. This is Thomas Raad, and welcome to this week's Bravos Coffee Chat, where every Friday we like to discuss about what is going on in the coffee markets. Instead of just a newsletter, I'm creating these videos and sharing it with you guys so that we can get a little more in depth and talk about what's going on with coffee in Brazil and around the world. So this video is relevant for week one, October 2022. And let's get right into it. Some of the topics that we have here today, we always start out with coffee futures. We got coffee consumption prices up in Europe, the Brazilian National Petroleum Agency authorizing imports of diesel to Brazil, the Colombia coffee production and estimated exports, hail rains in Minas Gerais regions, which was a crazy phenomenon that happened, and Brazil's presidential election, which is something very, very serious. So let's get right into it. Um, First things first, we have another volatile week in coffee futures for coffee. On Thursday in specific, we saw a jump, I think 500 or 600 point jump. I think it was closed at 224, 225 on the day yesterday, but that didn't sustain for today. Prices dropped right down amidst the hail rains that happened. But we still have estimate for rains in October that are higher than usual, which is good for flowering, which is good for coffee production in general for next year. But there is a lot of speculation on 2023's coffee crop. I mean, it's obviously too early to tell, but at the same time, price resistance in prices, under 200, it's just not going to happen right now, and over 230 is just kind of like is also same kind of a strategy. It's just like, what's the basis of coffee going back up over 230, especially at this point when we are already done with the Brazilian harvest, what we already seen, or what we're following with consumption and inflation in the rest of the world, which is just not at its peak point. So there's no reason really why it should be continued to push up. Um, so we did end up today, on a down note, around 2000, I'm sorry, 218 or 217 cents per pound. And all eyes continue to be on 2023's coffee crop. I want to get into this subject, which coffee prices or coffee retail prices were up 17% versus August 2021 in comparison to last year. Uh, with on top of that, the 10% inflation in the Eurozone, we have to watch closely. The thing that I'd like to talk about is just that we just have to watch closely what's going to happen this winter, like what's going to happen this winter in Europe and what's going to happen this winter in the United States, where we'll be watching even closer, coffee stocks, the iced coffee stocks and the GSA stocks. Just to touch about the iced coffee stocks this week, we're not going to get too much into it, but it has been in general unchanged. We're still at hovering around 400,000 Arabica bags, about 91,000 metric tons of Robusta bags. Now, a topic that I thought was interesting to comment for this week is Brazil's National Petroleum Agency, ANP, authorized the import of Russian diesel, looking for other alternatives rather than the United States. Now, this doesn't mean that Brazil is going to be obligated to or is obligating companies to import the diesel. It's just an authorization. It's just simply giving out the import license. I think it was for two companies in specific to purchase or to negotiate this diesel. If there's any news, if anything concrete happened, I'll definitely be the first to let you know. But these are licenses that are valid for 90 days and that could have an extended period of another 90 days. Depending on what negotiations. And this is interesting also because I believe that this is a push, or this is a movement that getting into the winter of the northern hemisphere and all this tensions and relations and frustration with Russia, Brazil wants to make sure it has its fuel for the end of the year and for the early next year for exports, and for not for unchanged diesel prices for freight, for transport freight inside of Brazil, which is the main, source of transport of all commodities and all grains, coffee especially. Um, so this is something that I thought was interesting, and I thought that it's good to keep your eyes close if anything actually happens, if any deals um, consolidate. Now, this week I saw an information, or I saw an article about Colombia's coffee production for this year. It seems like the estimate is going to be around 1 million bags less than originally evaluated. And in theory, it's going to be in its lowest level since 2014. Now I'm moving my camera over here because I want to show you the graph of the US dollar to Colombian peso, which also is being favored for exports. You can see this is a year to date calendar from January till now. Obviously, it did drop in the beginning and toward the beginning of the year, but now it's at its highest level since the year started. And this is favorable for coffee exports in general, not just in Brazil, but when it happens in Colombia, it's also favorable for Colombia also. One of the things, though, we have to keep touching on, and I think some of us do know this, is that Colombia is now one of the biggest importers of coffee in Brazil. But you don't expect it to be one of the biggest importers of coffee because the consuming scene is just too much. No, it's not that. It's just that the government is using government is using the option, or pretty much exercising the option, that they can import green coffee from Brazil to Colombia with certain restrictions. This is mainly Brazilian residue, with certain restrictions, but they are exporting as much as they can their own production, which is obviously in markets like Europe and the United States, Colombian coffee is very highly valued. So it's kind of like it's like a knife with two sides, if you know what I mean, in terms that Colombia is importing Brazilian coffee, even with the peso is favorable for exports and not imports because they buy Brazilian coffee with the United States dollar, correct? So they're going to import in Brazilian coffee with the United States dollar, but they're not re-exporting. They're using it for the industry purposes and selling it inside and passing on these prices to the consumer inside Colombia. At the same time, they're exporting their own production as much as they can to the rest of the world. If I'm not mistaken, Colombia should be around top 7 in terms of volumes in bags imported from Brazil. We'd have to pick this up really quickly from Secafe. Let me see if I can get this data from year to date really fast right now. Export, Brazilian export, national export. Let's see from per country, and I have it here. Let's open that up and let's see what I can show you. This is year to date, 2022. Colombia is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in sixth place. As you can see, Colombia is look how interesting this is. Colombia is like the likes of United States, Germany, Belgium, Italy, and Japan. Colombia imported almost 1 million bags already this year. That is absurd in terms of number. After it's ahead of Spain, Turkey, Holland, England, the United Kingdom, South Korea, Argentina, a lot of big countries. So definitely something to keep your eyes on. But it seems like Colombia just put themselves right in the smack middle of top 6 importers of Brazilian coffee, between 1.1 million and 760,000, which is the next highest, which is from Spain. Now, next topic I want to talk about is the hail rains that happened this week. This is a crazy phenomenon. It's not, I wouldn't say it's crazy, but it has happened while I was living in the region, before, but I haven't seen it that big or that just widespread, in the coffee producing regions in Minas Gerais. It seems like 16,000 hectares in Minas Gerais were affected by these hails. 63 different cities registered these rains. 1,090 producers registered a certain amount of loss. They don't, can't really say if it's a lot or a little, but in theory, it's not that. In theory, it's just not that much. Why would I say that? Because come this time October, coffee is not really there. There's no coffee. Everything has been harvested. Everything has been put away. Everything's went to, most of most of the coffees went to cooperatives or for exporters or for their own, or third party warehouses in other cities. But the largest cities that were affected were in the south of Minas regions, all close to Varginha, which is a pole of coffee exports. Andradas, Coqueiral, Campanha, Paraguaçu. All of these cities are within 1 hour, within 1 hour and a half driving to Varginha, Minas Gerais, and about 4-5 hours maximum to the port of Santos. So you guys can be located, get an estimate of how far it is from the port and where these coffees have been hit. But like I said, if these hails have to be big enough or they have to be heavy enough, they have to be actually doing damage to trees, like knocking off leaves, knocking off stems, knocking off branches, to actually do damage for next year's crop. And that didn't seem so, or did not seem reported as much in general. Other types of crops like fruit crops and vegetables that are less resistant have had more damages. That is for sure. Now, last but not least, I want to talk to you guys a little bit about what's going on in the presidential elections in Brazil. This is something that people are posting throughout the week on LinkedIn and other social media and on Twitter. I did touch these ideas on Twitter during the week, during the election night, and these kind of things. But it's a very delicate situation. Brazil's presidential election is a very, very, very delicate situation. I am not going to be talking biased about left or right or conservative or liberal. That's not the importance here, but I'm just wanting to state the facts, and the facts you guys can curate, your own conclusions. You guys can create your own conclusions from these facts, but I want to show it to you guys straight from the source, and some things that are very important to pay attention to that maybe you have seen or have not yet. But if you have seen, Lula, who was the president of Brazil back in 2002, apparently has the most intention of votes at 57 million, which is 48.4%. But he needed 50% or 50 plus 1 to be able to win in the first round. In the first round, Brazil is allowed, other options, third, fourth, fifth options, to be able to participate. And usually it's just very weak. Any alternative option, any third party is just extremely weak. When you're talking about either conservative or liberal, and then the third party or the center is just like, it's almost non-existent in Brazil, as you can see by the numbers. Simone Tebet was under 5%. Ciro Gomes, 3%. If you put up both of them, they don't even get 8%. And then Soraya and Luis Felipe, if you put them together, it's just about 1%. So now Bolsonaro had 51 million votes. And we have situations that are coming at tone, as in Bolsonaro has always been accusing of elections with the electronic voting system becoming frauds. Lula accusing the agro part of Brazil and Brazilian farmers being fascists. This has something that he said. This is not something that I made up. The most conservative, the current Congress and Senate right now is actually, after the first round of the elections, is actually the most conservative in the history of Brazil, which is something very interesting to point out. 106 congressmen that are conservatives, considered conservatives, and 68 that are mostly considered more liberal. And the Senate has about 18 of 27 more lean on to the conservative ideas rather than liberal. And what does all this mean for Brazil? We're going to go into our second round, which is just simply Lula versus Bolsonaro on October 30th. Simone Tebet has already announced that she is supporting Lula, which is something very interesting to be considered on. Not that doesn't mean that all her voters are going to go to Lula, but she did publicly state her support. Everybody else is just, to be honest, irrelevant here in Brazil. Just completely irrelevant. So Simone, I think would make is something very interesting that I had to mention about. Ex-presidents and ex opposition of Lula back then, Fernando Henrique Cardoso, which is used to be a president of Brazil in the 90s, is supporting Lula. José Serra also supporting Lula, which was Lula's opposition in 2010, if I'm not mistaken, or that was Dilma's opposition, I think. And Geraldo Alckmin was also in opposition back then, also supporting Lula. But these players, these political players, were more center or more center, moderate Dems, moderate liberal, moderate conservatives in Brazil. I mean, they were known as that throughout their whole political career. Excuse me. And they publicly announced their support for Lula. So we will see what is going to happen on the second round of election, but there's a lot of division in Brazil right now. This is something that I mentioned that actually on other social media, talking to other Brazilian people in Portuguese recently, that Brazil is very, very much divided. Brazil, it's not hectic in Brazil. It's not crazy. People are not killing each other, and they're not all over the place. But it's just that the division is just so evident between conservative and liberal. It's painful to see, to be honest, as someone who lives here, that has, it's a country with a lot of beautiful people, a lot of a lot of caring people, a lot of business to be made, a lot of investment opportunities, a lot of opportunities in general, for all classes, independent who you are, if you're, part of the agriculture, if you're part of the industry, if you're part of whatever, being conservative or liberal. It's just a great country. It's a big country. There's a lot of things to take care of, but just that it's just so divided right now. It's hard to keep up, with ideas. And unfortunately, neither Bolsonaro or Lula, in my opinion, have taken enough time to discuss about continuing to grow Brazil over the next 4 years, which is essentially what they're fighting for, right? Mainly, all the debates that I've watched or everything that I've seen on the news is just pointing fingers and pointing fingers. Who's worse? Who's worse? Who's worse? And what did I do in the past? And what did I do in the past? Nobody talks about what's going on in the future. So that's something I want to get that off my chest, and I would love for whoever's watching this understand that here in Brazil, and see how people are, and understand the psyche or psychology of people in Brazil. What are they leaning toward, in understatement of what all this is, what's going on out of all this. The agro completely pro Bolsonaro, the liberals completely pro Lula right now, and it's just like a stalemate, and we'll see what's going to happen. But Lula being elected, you see him, he's going to have a much tougher time against Congress because of the Congress being more conservative. Whereas Bolsonaro, if he's reelected, he's going to have a much easier time to implement more of his ideas and more of his projects because of the Senate and the Congress that he's given support to. Most of them got elected, ex-ministers, governors, and this and that. I mean, I can go into details for hours about this, but this is the actual scenario here in Brazil right now. And I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I don't know how long it took, but this is week 1, October 2022 coffee chat with me, Thomas Raad, founder and broker of Bravos Commodity Trading, originating coffee and other commodities out of Brazil. And I hope you liked the video. And if you have any comments or feedbacks or anything you just want to discuss about, please say it. Send me a message on LinkedIn. Send me a message on YouTube. Comment down below, wherever you want. And I hope to hear you guys soon. So until then, stay classy.